another episode of the Down South Hunting Podcast. This is Mike Higman. We've got a really cool episode for you today. As you know, we were down at the QDMA convention, had a great time there, and we had the opportunity to sit down with a couple guys and just talk deer hunting and some studies. I think you'll really like it. Before we get to that, though, I want to let you in on a little bit of news on a project that Adam and I have been working on and we're really excited about. We've got Dan Infalt, the big buck serial killer, and the Michigan legend, Jon Eberhart, going to be coming on, and we're going to be interviewing them about scent control tactics. And if you know anything about those guys, you know they have two very different opinions on it. So I think it's going to be really interesting. So keep an eye out for that. We got a mini-sode coming up first. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you get that episode as soon as it comes out. We would appreciate it as we're getting ready to release that episode. We're going to be putting info out on social media. If you guys would share that and like it and whatever, make sure your friends know about it. That'd be great. The more traction we can get with it, the more opportunity we're going to be able to have guests like that on again in the future. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this episode. Welcome to the Down South Hunting Podcast. This is Mike Higman. I've got your co-host here, Adam Cruz, in person. We're at the QDMA National Convention, and we got a couple guests with us. I've got Dr. Duane Diefenbach, and I'm going to let him explain his position because we've gone through this a couple times and I've screwed it up. We've also got Jon Livingston, who is one of the co-founders of DeerLab, and we'll let him explain what that is as well. So let's start with Dr. Diefenbach. Can you tell me what your position entails and kind of give us an idea of what you do?
Sure. I'm the unit leader for the Pennsylvania Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit. And the cooperative unit is, like the name, it's a cooperative of Penn State University, the U.S. Geological Survey, the Pennsylvania Game Commission, the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, the Wildlife Management Institute, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So my job is, as a federal employee in this unit, is to, I'm at Penn State, I'm an adjunct professor, I mentor graduate students, I teach graduate courses, and I also do, most importantly, collaborative research with the State Wildlife Agency. And for the past 15, 18 years, I've been doing research on whitetail deer with the Pennsylvania Game Commission.
Okay, so Adam, can you tell us why we would have a northerner like Dr. Diefenbach on the Down South Hunting Podcast?
Like I've tried explaining, this is the second northerner we've had on, but Mike refuses to identify as a Yankee. But Dr. Diefenbach, he put on a great presentation seminar here at the QDMA convention. I'll let him talk about the study that he went through, but it was fascinating to me to see the study done on a buck and a doe and their movements, and we'll get into that more after introductions.
And Jon, can you tell us a little bit about DeerLab? What does DeerLab do, and what do you do for DeerLab?
Sure. I'm the co-founder. I think I need a longer title now that I've heard your title. But DeerLab is an online service for trail cameras, and basically hunters will upload their trail camera photos. We manage and analyze your trail camera photos. So when your photo comes in, you basically drag and drop them from your computer into DeerLab. We work with any trail camera. The photos are uploaded. We sync in with your local weather station and bring weather data that trail cameras can't capture for every individual photo. In a couple of weeks, we will be doing photo recognition, so we'll auto tag what is in the photo. So if you have a deer or a turkey or whatever it might be, we'll tag that automatically. And then we give you tools to be able to create profiles for individual animals. It could be a group of deer, it could be your does, it could be your bucks, it could be an individual buck, and we aggregate that data together and tell you what cameras that buck is hitting, what times he's hitting that camera, how he's moving by wind direction, as far as wind direction and wind speed. We tell you a whole sort of different reports for that individual buck, so you can get a better picture of what he's doing instead of just looking at individual photos.
Cool. I tell you what, one of the coolest, so there's all these seminars here at the National Convention. It's been really cool to listen to those. But I think even better than that is just been getting to hang out with guys like these guys and hear their opinions on stuff, and a lot of like off the record kind of stuff where you might not have an official opinion on something, but you know, everybody's got their deer hunting stories. It's been a really good time doing that stuff.
I've enjoyed that as well. Let's kick off the questions. Dr. Duane, if you could explain to us the high level of your study, and then we'll kind of get more into questions as far as what the study looked like.
Sure. So we're doing research in north central Pennsylvania, which is what we call the Big Woods area. So 95% of that property is either state forest land managed by the Bureau of Forestry or state game lands managed by the Pennsylvania Game Commission. So it's huge tracts of deciduous forest roads. It's in our Allegheny Plateau region, so it's flat mountain. Well, what looks like mountains are really just flat, and then there's steep drainages that have been eroded over time, but it's all forested. Our other study areas in central Pennsylvania in the Ridge and Valley region. So you have forested ridges. Oftentimes those ridge tops are owned by the Bureau of Forestry or, again, the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And the valleys are where the people live, so they're farmed and housing developments and that sort of thing. So that's the context in which we're doing this research. We're capturing deer. The objective of that study, really, we're not really doing the study to follow deer. That's just sort of a byproduct or a benefit of it. But we're really interested in how do we manage deer to maintain the forest conditions that were desired, but also knowing that soil conditions and acidification over the past 30 years has affected soils, and we have invasive plants and competing vegetation. So that's the purpose of the study. So I'm getting off topic of what you want to talk about, but that's why we're there. And part of this research, we need to know how many deer are out there and what the harvest rates are and survival rates. And so we're putting GPS collars on deer. And with the technology today, you know, we can get several thousand locations a year on a deer, and we can send communications to the collars to say, okay, start collecting a location every 20 minutes, which is what we do during the deer rifle season, which is 12 days in late November, early December.
How do you capture the deer to collar them?
We use either clover traps, which are basically a walk-in trap, or rocket nets, which you fire a net over the deer.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's a blast. It is my
How do I get
preferred
signed
deer
up for that?
capture method.
Although I have heard, you know, some of those times where they're sitting out there and it's basically hunting where, you know, you could sit out there for a night and not see anything as well, you know, sitting there with the rocket net ready. So
yeah, I call it catch and release deer hunting.
yeah, catching deers, catching deers.
Yeah, there we go. Free plug, catching deers. Well, so I guess what I was trying to get out of your study personally as a hunter is how can I locate, or maybe let me back up. How can I look at what a deer's doing daily during their daily activity during a high pressured, you know, time of the season? What are they doing? Where are they going? How far is their home range? And how can I, as a hunter, in my mind, best strategize to kill that deer? And I know in this particular instance, in your study, it's almost impossible to kill these two deer. In reality, it would be pretty difficult for hunters to kill just where they're at terrain-wise. But if I take that back home to where I live in Tennessee, the terrain is not exactly as rugged. I feel like, and this is just me personally, if I can understand what those deer are doing in Pennsylvania, I can kind of correlate that maybe to what's going on in my home state and my local deer herd, and how deer react naturally is what I'm looking at.
Sure. So all the deer that we radio collar are at least they've survived at least 2 hunting seasons before we capture them and radio collar them. So the first hunting season after they've been radio collared, they're at least 2.5 years old. We don't age deer. We simply age deer as 6 months or adult. So they could be 3.5, but they're at least 2.5 years old. And so that means that they've already had 2 hunting seasons that they've survived. And one of the things I was interested in knowing is how do they survive? Because this study area, the study areas that we're working on currently have some of the lowest harvest rates we've ever documented in Pennsylvania. If you told me before we went into this hunting season, it's public land, so there's no limit to who can hunt there, that we should expect to see harvest rates of 60% on adult bucks and probably about 40% on yearling bucks because we have antler point restrictions in Pennsylvania. Both of these study areas, a deer has to have at least 3 points on a side before it's legal to be harvested. What we found in this study is that harvest rates on bucks is about 15%.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Yeah, huge difference. And that means that a 4.5, 5.5-year-old deer is not unusual on our study area. And in fact, we've had some deer that the batteries were about to die, so we had to blow the collar off, and they never got harvested.
Wow.
So we're talking about deer that have already figured out how to survive the hunting season. And so the question was, how do they do it? Do they go nocturnal? Do they leave their home range? Some of our animals have access to private land in that ridge and valley region. They might be on the ridge tops. That might be the center of their home range, but they could certainly drop off the side of that ridge and down into private land. And in fact, that doesn't happen. They have a home range. They stay within it. In fact, you do see less activity during that intensive rifle season, but they still show that greater activity morning and evening, and they don't leave their home range, and some deer don't even run to private ground. They run to public ground to hide.
What is the home range?
In our study areas, they're probably the larger home ranges in the state. So we're talking a square mile for a female, and a buck is going to be on average 2 square miles, the annual home range. But some are 3-4 square miles.
And the property, you kind of described the terrain that we are looking at now. It's rugged. I mean, what type of elevation change does this particular property have where the home ranges are at for this doe and this buck?
So probably from the lowest in that area, the lowest to highest elevation, probably 1,000 feet in difference.
And that's pretty steep for most whitetail hunters that running into. I mean,
yeah, I don't particularly enjoy it, and I try to avoid it.
I'm not. And your pictures, it was like cluttered with rocks. It was. I mean, it would be tough to get up and down with a gun on your back. If you was trying to pack in a tree stand, it'd just almost be impossible to get to these deer.
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah, it would be hard. In fact, I was thinking I wouldn't even want to carry my gun through that because I know I'd slip and smash it on the rocks.
You mentioned annual home range as far as being a mile for a doe and 2 miles for bucks. And I assume that's pretty much the rut is kind of extending those areas. For non-rutting times, what would the home range look like as far as size-wise?
So for a male, if you don't include the rut's basically the same size as a female. But the other thing we've observed is during the rut, female home ranges actually decline a little bit. And we think that's because like if you're lost in the woods, if you want to get found, you're told don't move. So if they're hoping that a buck finds them, they're actually restricting their movements. And of course, males are expanding their movements. So that should maximize the chances that a male will encounter a female. But yeah, basically, if you don't include the rut, the home ranges of males and females are basically a square mile.
Square mile.
With the does shrinking their area during the rut, that does go to support the saying of, during the rut, you want to hunt the does to find the bucks.
Keying on the doe. I'm also interested in the home range. Does the home range change from season to season? So from summertime to fall to winter, do you keep track of that? If that same doe has a different home range, does it move at all?
Yeah, on average, the answer is no. All right, for most deer, their home range looks like some sort of circle-ish shape, elliptical shape. But there are exceptions. And so we've seen females that actually have summer and winter home ranges. And those all occur in the southern study area. And what we think is going on is that these females are leaving the large tracts of woods to find more agricultural landscape to give birth to fawns, because we found higher survival rate of fawns when you have more ag land. So that's what we see in the southern area. Now up north, we don't really see that split movement for the most part. And we did actually have one male who he has two home ranges, one outside the rut and one during the rut. So he actually moves about 5 miles and spends the fall in this area. There must be more females there. And then after the hunting season, after the rut's over, he goes back to his winter and summer place.
He's like a real maverick.
Yeah, I mean, I can't explain it. That's what it is. And he's done this for 2 or 3 years now.
It probably worked once, and he knows.
He's going back.
How many deer do you have collared?
We try to maintain about 40 deer radio collared.
Wow. Is that split rate, like even ratio, does and bucks?
Actually, a little more females, maybe 6 or 7 females and 3 or 4 bucks. So, it depends on what we catch, but that's how we try and allocate the collars.
This is kind of jumping back a little bit, but do you think the low harvest rate do you know if that's a low harvest rate historically? Like you're saying it's low compared to most areas in Pennsylvania. Do you think that's lower now than it was, say, 10 years ago?
Oh, yeah. And through the 70s, 80s, and 90s in Pennsylvania, the harvest rate on bucks was about 80%.
Do you think there's less bucks harvested now, or do you think there's just more hunters? So the same amount of bucks are getting killed, but by lower percentage of the hunters?
You can only shoot 1 buck a year. So 1 buck per person. So what we're seeing, Pennsylvania implemented antler point restrictions in 2002.
Oh, that'd have a big impact, probably.
So that reduced the number of deer that are harvested. And also it's reduced because the Game Commission also reduced the population by about 40% to try and get that relationship between habitat and deer numbers. So we reduced deer population, which reduced the number of bucks that are out there. We implemented antler point restrictions, which makes it harder to harvest a buck because fewer are legal to be harvested. And so that's reduced the number of deer that are harvested. But there's a greater proportion of older deer in the population.
What's the overall feeling on that? Maybe from a wildlife biology standpoint, that's the obvious right thing to do. Obviously there's going to be a vocal minority, but how did hunters in general feel about that?
Well, first of all, I'd have to say that it's not so much, I disagree that it's a wildlife science issue. It's more of a social issue.
Okay.
Pennsylvania for 8 decades or so had a rule that if a buck had an antler that was more than 3 inches long or branched, it was legal to be harvested. And we didn't have any problems with the population. So it's more of a social issue and what people want. And we've studied that extensively when we implemented antler point restrictions, and we found that hunters, over 50% of hunters, it's about 60% of hunters, support antler point restrictions. So there's support for it.
So, okay, from a a biology standpoint, I've always heard the argument for antler point restrictions is not because you want bigger antlers, because you want more mature deer, which is a more natural environment for deer to have a differing age structure. So if you're saying back in the 70s, they were all small bucks that were getting killed, do you think as far as like long-term population-wise, either way could work?
Well, Pennsylvania's hunting season is the majority of bucks are harvested after the rut. And we know from genetic studies that all the bucks are breeding.
Mm-hmm.
Now, older bucks have a slightly greater success in breeding, right? But it's not that much. And so we're harvesting our deer after the breeding season, so there's really not a lot of selection going on, right? They've all had an opportunity to breed, then we harvest them. Now, you could argue that, perhaps we're taking bigger bucks, but I mean, we were taking almost everything. So it was almost like we made it an even playing field. And you could argue that, and I would agree that ultimately, yes, it's probably, the species evolved with a much older age structure, but just by implementing antler point restrictions in Pennsylvania, we did not even come close to an older age structure. Sure, we've got 40% more 2.5 and older bucks than we used to, but that's not coming close to what you'd expect under
if it wasn't
might have
if there weren't
existed
hunters.
pre-European times.
So you still have a bunch of hunters shooting 2.5-year-old deer, is what it boils down to.
There's a lot of deer harvested in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
What is it about Pennsylvania that, are there just naturally way more deer per square mile naturally in Pennsylvania than, say, a lot of other states? Because so many get killed there, but you still have a lot of deer.
Well, it's the hunter ratio too, right? Like the hunting culture, hunting traditions really high in Pennsylvania.
All that's correct. I think what it is the mid-Atlantic states are really the sweet spot for the white-tailed deer. If you think about it, up until a few years ago, we didn't have diseases like EHD, which is transmitted by the midge. It's a southern disease. And we don't have harsh winters. Our deer don't yard up in the wintertime. So we have, fairly high survival rates. It's good habitat. If we have the right, in southern part of Pennsylvania, 30% of our fawns are getting pregnant and giving birth as 1-year-olds. That's not the case up north, but you can see that, it's the perfect place to live if you're a white-tailed deer. It's not too cold in the winter, and it's not too hot in the summer.
Except for the number of hunters that are after you.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
What else do you got, Adam?
Okay, well, I've got one really important question that you covered during the seminar. As far as when hunting pressure occurs, do deer go nocturnal, or is that a myth? According to your research.
There is a behavior, if you look at their movement, they reduce their movements, but they're still most active in the morning and the evening, just like you'd expect a deer to be. So I can say that yes, they do change their behavior a little bit, but when you tell me go nocturnal, I think
absolutely
they're
no
nothing
movement
during the day and that suddenly they're doing everything at night. I'd have to disagree.
And see, that's what most hunters think. And so that's what I thought was really interesting about this study is, although, yes, it may decrease, but it doesn't go completely dormant. Deer are they're going to still get on their feet. They're still going to have to go eat, they drink, they do their normal routine. Maybe it's not as a normal routine anymore because there is the hunting pressure involved, but they still are moving during the daytime hours. And you also talked about the times that you might want to hunt based off of your research and based off of that hunting pressure. And that was in the afternoon, it sounded like. So if you could maybe explain some of that.
Sure. So what we've observed is they don't run to private land. They don't go nocturnal. What they do is they after having survived 2 hunting seasons, know that there's this place that I go to and I don't get disturbed. And what they do is they, by 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, they're sitting in that spot, and they're going to sit there usually until around noon. And then you start to see those afternoon movements. So my recommendation is don't give up on the afternoon hunt, because you might catch them when they actually start their movements again.
So you could maybe go to the Waffle House, eat breakfast, drive out to get in your tree stand by about 11 a.m. and just hunt the rest of the day.
Yep, that might be a strategy that could work.
Sounds perfect, because I hate waking up in the mornings.
Deer love the smell of bacon.
Yeah.
Another free plug.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig in that a little bit deeper, and maybe give me the whole scenario. Let's say your family is at home starving, and you know those deer are your only shot at feeding your family. So you know you've got to kill one of those deers, and those that say that, let's say you have to get the buck. How are you gonna hunt one of those bucks from your study? Like maybe even a particular scenario how you would go at it. You may even know what his home area is, but obviously you're not tracking him as you're hunting him.
So I think what you have to do, the only thing, and I've thought about this a little bit, is you're going to have to hunt cooperatively with other folks. That is a deer drive.
Okay.
So you're going to have to kick him out of that, because you can't get there before he gets there. All right? You'd have to get there at midnight.
Okay.
And sit there and freeze for 5 hours, 7 hours before it's even legal to hunt. Or you can't sneak up on them, because there's just no way to sneak up on them in this where they are. And if you jump them, you'd be lucky to even see their tail, because they'd be gone in a flash. So I think what you have to do is you have to do a drive, and someone's going to have to kick them out of that hiding spot, and then someone hopefully has an opportunity to get that animal as it's fleeing that drive that's going on.
That's really interesting. So that makes me think of another study you were talking to us earlier about at lunch, which I think you said wasn't published. So hopefully you don't have a problem sharing this publicly.
No, it's fine.
Okay,
it's in
cool.
a thesis.
Okay, cool. So I know you guys did a study where you were tracking hunters, and there was a sweet spot as to where the best hunting was based on distance from the road and pressure. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we did a study where hunters volunteered to wear GPS units. So we were able to basically map the relative density of hunters. We also actually did aerial surveys, and because hunters have to wear hunter orange during the rifle season, and there's no leaves on the trees. And from that, we were able to map and estimate hunter density and map that on the landscape. And then we had female deer radio collared and looked at where a deer was located on the landscape and the probability that it would be shot during hunting season. And so the hunters were distributed, as you might imagine, the further you got from a road and the steeper the slope, the less likely you were to find a hunter. And what we found is that there was this sweet spot where I think hunter density was really high near the roads, and deer were going to avoid roads. But as you got away a little bit further, there's a lower density of hunters, but enough hunters to kind of move deer around. And those deer that were in that location, sort of that sweet spot about a half mile from a road, were more likely to be harvested than ones whose locations were closer to roads or further away.
Yeah, that's the most interesting part I thought was the further away guys had a little bit less chance in that sweet spot just because there wasn't the pressure moving the deer around.
And I thought it was also interesting how far the hunters actually thought they were walking. And you said it was, 4 times? greater?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of research more in the recreational field. Like they ask hikers, where did you go? How far did you go? And it's all based on, self-reported distances and that sort of thing. And this gave us an opportunity to actually check self-reported versus actual. And people's perceptions are, walking through Laurel, a half mile probably feels like 2 miles. But yeah, on average, they probably said they traveled about 4 times as far as they actually did.
So there you go.
Yeah.
I believe that.
What was the average
study.
distance you said they actually did travel? It was like a third of a kilometer or
No,
something?
about you could find about 80% of the hunters within about a third to a half mile from the road.
Yeah.
But you have to keep in mind this study here, we have these flat plateaus, and that's where the roads are, and then things drop off from there. So you don't want to go more than that far anyway.
Yeah.
It's probably pretty accurate anywhere you go. I would say that the average distance traveled by a hunter to their tree stand, half mile, 1 mile.
Yeah, 200-300 yards, I think, is a lot of guys.
And that's the case.
depending
Just
on
hide
the
the
terrain.
truck.
Hey, we used to have a tree stand at home we called the condo, and we built this thing on stilts, and underneath it you could drive your four-wheeler under it, and you could close a gate up, and we gun hunted out of it, obviously, but that thing was awesome. You drive right up in there. Yeah, the deer you could see hundreds of yards all around you. You just drive through the field, deer don't even care, just get right up in there and climb up in your
Should
stand.
have built some ramps right up to it. Just drive the ATV right inside and close the door and
That would
sit
have
on
been
the
a little
ATV.
expensive, a little extravagant. We didn't want to go
maybe.
that far, you
Yeah.
know? Keep it simple.
Yeah. So John, let's go off topic a little bit. What kind of hunting do you do? What's I know we haven't talked about it. You're from Florida as well.
I am Jacksonville area.
Yeah. So what kind of hunting do you do? What do you enjoy?
Well, I'm a bow hunter, but I haven't really been hunting. I didn't grow up in a hunting family. I've been hunting about 6-7 years now, and pretty much bow hunt. I do some traveling, like I went to Idaho for some elk hunting. I've been up to Ohio, southern Ohio, public land hunting, but most of my hunting is in the outside of Jacksonville, and Florida hunting is difficult. It's we're here at the QDMA, and there's a lot of discussions about land management, and we don't have the ability to be able to do some of the things that these guys are doing. That's a dream of mine, to be able to do that, but it's difficult as far as trails and getting into kind of some of what a Midwesterner would go into. You don't really have that as much in Florida, or at least where I'm hunting. I hunt kind of on the edge of a swamp, and the deer are very small. I was up in Ohio a couple of years ago, and I came across the last day. I was about 70 yards away from a 150 to 160 class. It's hard for me to really judge the size of a deer, especially with the deer that I'm used to in Florida. But it was pretty amazing sight just watching it for 10 minutes or so, and drawing back just to do something during that time, and the amount of shaking that I did looking at that large buck. But it's still fun. I didn't have much success this past year. I took my son out, who's 7, for the first time, and we shot a doe, which was awesome. And that was
That's a
kind
success.
That is
it
a
was
success.
a huge success. It was a highlight, really, of my hunting career. It was nothing special as far as the doe, but just to see his reaction, let him follow the trail, and then him come across the deer was just a really special memory.
Well, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, maybe given that it's a tougher area to find trails and that kind of stuff, can you maybe share some tips or advice on trail camera placement as far as how to get the most pictures and get the best idea of what might be on a piece of property?
Sure. I hunt on a parcel that's about 200 acres. It's private land, and we have, between any given time, 10 to 15 cameras out there, which is probably more than what most people have on a specific on that size
That
of
sounds awesome.
property.
That'd be great.
But it's in Florida, there's baiting. Baiting is fine, and so because we can't do much to the property, we do have feeders, and so that's one area that will just kind of get an idea of what's out there. We don't really do any official deer surveys, but that's kind of gives us a better idea as far as what's on the property. Rubs are the property that I'm on doesn't have a lot of rubs, but when we do put cameras over rubs, especially during this later in the season, it's a great way of kind of seeing some more of the bucks come through. I have a swamp edge that I get a lot of activity on. It's on our property. The wind typically is coming out of the north, and so the swamp is on the south side, and so you can basically not be detected by being in the swamp, and everything's in front of you. So we get a lot of daytime activity as far as bucks going along that swamp edge. But a lot of the property is pretty thick, and so it's kind of difficult. There's some trails that we will have cameras on, and so we're just trying to give an inventory of them. And but it's probably not the ideal location, especially when listening to some of these sessions here and guys talking about their properties in the Midwest.
Yeah, they're 155-inch minimums that they want their neighbors to
yeah,
have as well.
Let them grow.
I almost passed out right there.
Yeah.
What about actual cameras? Because I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of. I know you as a company, DeerLab, has dealt with a lot of different camera manufacturers. So instead of getting into brands, maybe some things to look for guys that want to get, guys and gals that want to get into getting more pictures. What are some features and cameras that might be something somebody would look for when they're shopping for a trail camera?
Sure. I'm a big fan of trigger speed, or how fast the shutter speed can be of capturing a picture, because there's a lot of cameras out there. Like if you go and get some of the really cheap ones out there, like a Walmart special or something like that, the trigger speed can be pretty slow, and you might be missing a lot of photos because of those cameras being slower. I try to encourage people to step up their trail cameras a little bit. You don't have to go super expensive, but if you can bump it up a little bit, you're not only going to have faster trigger speed, but the refresh time of the camera, of how fast it kicks in to be able to take another picture, is important as well. And then battery life. You can save money by getting a cheap camera at Walmart, but the battery life alone, some of these cameras you can have over a year on battery life, where these cheaper cameras are just sucking the battery life, and you could go 2 months and you have to refresh the batteries. And so over time, those batteries cost more. You could have gone and gotten a nicer camera.
Yeah.
So I use black flash to where it's not detected. I think there's different groups that believe that it affects deer, and some believe that it doesn't, but I kind of stick towards the black flash. It doesn't do as great of a picture at nighttime, but it's still, I'm not really seeing deer looking at our cameras as they're walking by. There's a lot of different things that you can do with the cameras as far as not being detected, but I'd say that's probably the big items for a trail camera. I mean, there's a lot of great cameras on the market. There's also some cameras that are not so great. So we have an assortment of different cameras.
Yeah, cool. All right.
How about batteries? You tested different styles of batteries. I know, Duracell, Rayovac, Energizer. There's always debates going on in other industries of what batteries last longer. And I know Duracell even has, I can't remember the name of it, but they have like a superior battery now. Yeah. Have you tested out different batteries, and what have you found on that?
I haven't personally, you can read, there's a lot of material online as far as reading about batteries. And, for instance, if you're in colder climates, like freezing climates, lithium batteries can last longer. Even in extreme heat, the environment has the effects on the batteries. But there's studies out there where some of the cheapest batteries are completely fine. And I leave my cameras out. The cameras will be out now through end of the season. And so they're out there for a good amount of time. And usually most batteries will make it through that period of time without me having to change it out before the next season.
My day job, I actually sell, it's not my primary product, but we sell batteries. We sell all the different brands. And according to the manufacturers, when you find these, say like a Duracell or Rayovac, and you find them on the cheap, it's generally because they're reused batteries. So hospitals are supposed to change the batteries out of their equipment daily. That way you have fresh batteries in your equipment. Somebody doesn't die, whatever. That's great. But what they do is they repackage it and sell it. So there are companies out there that'll take these batteries from the hospital, buy them from them, repackage the batteries and sell it. So if you're a hunter out there and you're finding batteries on the cheap, but they're not working a really long time, it's probably because you're buying a used battery.
Huh.
Oh,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting feedback.
One of the first deals I listed on my website, huntinggeardeals.com, was a bunch of like bulk batteries from Duracell. And I had somebody send me a message on a message board like, hey, these are counterfeit.
Yeah.
So I did quite a bit of research into it. And the thing is, the batteries were Duracell. They were labeled Duracell. It looked exactly the same, but there's like a couple little characteristics. So I don't want to be misleading. So basically what I did is I'll only list battery deals that are retail packaging because I want to make sure people are getting. And there's actually, like, you got to be careful what you're looking at retail packaging wise too, because these knockoff companies will knock off the packaging as well. But usually there's some key differences you can look for.
It's the same with broadheads. There are companies in China right now selling Rage broadheads. They're not Rage broadheads, but they're packaging them as Rage. They're doing the same thing with Muzzy, and I think Rage actually has a lawsuit against some of these companies. So when you're buying them off eBay for cheap, it's not really Rage. Yeah.
Yep.
Got to be careful.
Crazy. So Duane, what kind of hunting do you typically do up there in Pennsylvania?
I hunt the muzzleloader season and the rifle season. I enjoy the muzzleloader season because we have an early October season. It's 1 week. It's antlerless only, and it's just a beautiful time of the year to be out in the woods.
Leaves changing and stuff. Is that?
Yep. Yeah. The birds are, songbirds are migrating through, and there's just always all sorts of stuff to just watch when you're sitting out there. And then we also have a late muzzleloader season as well. Although, my real passion is grouse hunting, and so there's a trade-off there.
Yeah. Is that the same type season?
Yeah,
so
pretty much overlaps. Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of property do you typically hunt? Public land, or do you have some family property?
No, I own 27 acres, and my neighbor has a little bit, and we hunt that for deer. And otherwise, I'm hunting mostly public land.
Okay. Do you hunt the area that you study?
No.
I mean, it sounds like you might not want to deer hunt there with the success rates, but I thought maybe there's some grouse there too. But
well, actually, I grouse hunt up. The northern study area actually has a lot of timber harvest operations going on, and a lot of different age structures to the forest. So there's actually pretty good grouse hunting up there, and there's good deer hunting. They're up there. They're big. There's old deer, big deer.
If you want to climb the mountain.
Yeah, or it's
set up a drive.
It's still a great place to go hunting.
How's the elk population in Pennsylvania right now? Are you familiar with that at all?
It's doing fine. They have hunts every year. We're a little concerned because chronic wasting disease is getting close to where the herd is. They're also, the population, they'd like the population to expand north and east because that would be away from people. But it's a tremendous tourism draw. A lot of people come up to see the elk in September during the rut.
I've heard there's some really big elk up there too.
Huge elk, yeah.
How hard is it for a non-resident to pull a tag from Pennsylvania?
It's hard for everybody.
Do you know how many tags are released every year?
Well, I think, boy, don't hold me to this, but it's maybe 100 or so tags.
Oh,
It's
man.
better than Tennessee's 5.
And it's about
Wow.
40 or 50,000 people put in for a tag.
But the price
Wow.
is pretty low, I've heard, like compared
Yeah.
to hunting out west. Like you're putting in for a lottery, but it's not like you got to build points up with $600 license
Yeah,
and
you
tag
can
fees
for
every
$10
year.
a year. You can collect points. That's what a friend of mine who.
So they do
really
have a point system as well.
Yep, and you can just buy a point and not put in for a tag.
But it sounds like with that many people putting for the drawing, if
Yeah.
it's so. Do you know if the point system, does that just increase your, like, could you draw with 1 point? Sure. Okay. So it's not like a max point system where you got to max out on your points in order to be drawn. So really you're putting in for a lottery ticket, but for $10, it'd be pretty cool to.
I think it's called like a
get some really
bonus
big
type
elk.
system.
Yeah.
I think that's what they call it out west, anyways.
Is there a high success rate for elk hunters?
Yeah, where
Like
I,
100
I was elk hunting in Idaho 3 years ago, and the success rate's 10%. That's
Yeah.
on public land.
It's tough out there.
Might be
It
need
is.
to start putting in for that Pennsylvania lottery. You never
Yeah.
know, you might
But that was
get
a,
lucky.
it was a $600 tag to do.
Yeah.
Was it over the counter?
Over the counter. Yeah, you could go into Cabela's or whatever and get it. And I actually shot one the first
Yeah.
day, 11
Awesome.
yards. It was awesome.
All
but-
right, let's hear the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's start this
well,
over.
Pivot.
that's I'm completely blessed to be able to get that elk. It was a 5x5. From Florida, a bunch of my friends, probably 5 friends.
That's probably why you got it. Those Florida hunters.
We
Yeah, definitely got to be that.
We all really didn't have any experience going elk hunting, and we did all of our research, and we would hike the bridges with our backpacks and just walking in our boots everywhere, and nothing prepares you for the mountains of Idaho. And anyway, we went out for opening season in September, and the first day we were at camp, and we left, I think, around 4 in the morning, and we're hiking. We had this one guy that knew the area that was helping us. He was the guy's name was Roy, and he would just take off like a month at a time, and he wouldn't shoot elk. He would just look at them, just watch them, and so he was kind of showing us, where he thinks elk are, and we split up as a group, and I went with him and 2 other friends, and we were all bow hunting, and he. I'll never forget, it was probably 4:30 in the morning. We're going along a gravel road, and then all of a sudden he just turns and just goes up the mountain. And I'm like, are you serious? We're going up there? And so we're all kind of like on our hands and knees going up this, and he's probably 65 and just completely just takes off. And we're huffing and puffing. It just, we were probably around 10,000 feet. And we did that for till about 9:30 or so. And I've never been so tired in my life. All the months of training and everything, you're like, what in the world? And we hadn't adjusted to the altitude yet, too. So it was pretty difficult. But I'll never forget, like 30 minutes before I shot the elk, I'm like on the side of the mountain, and I have a huge blister from my boot. I'm not used to. I wore my boots a ton, but I just wasn't used to the angles of the mountains that my boot was hitting me. But anyway, we got up to this top of this ridge. We had gone over 2 ridges. We were 8 miles in from camp, and we got up to this wallow, and there was a fresh tracks. It looked like an elk had just been playing in it, and it was just beautiful scenery. And Roy, I tell a friend of mine, I'm like, this looks like a place to shoot an elk, and I'm like, Roy, can you call? And we weren't calling, and we weren't really hearing any elk because there is a wolf issue in Idaho, and so all the elk are very quiet because they're not trying to give their locations away. And so he did some bugles, and he took a big limb and was raking it up and down a tree, and I split off both my friend Charles, and we had a cameraman too with us. Well, he was just a friend with a video camera, and he went with Charles, and I went over probably 30 or 40 yards to the left, and Charles was to the right, and the elk came out. I didn't see him at all, and Charles saw him, but he didn't have a shot. He was behind some bushes, and he basically darted around towards the left, towards me, and I was behind a big tree, and it was cold. It was probably in the that's one thing that really was surprising. The temperature changes were between probably 20 degrees and 75 degrees during the day.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was a drastic change. And anyway, the elk circled around trying to wind us and to see what was making that call. And he stopped right on the other side of the tree that I was behind. And I could see his breath coming from the tree, and it was just like this smokestack almost, just kind of huffing. I could hear his breath, and it was just like, it was intense.
I might crap my pants.
And it was, here you train so much, and you're shooting and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden everything happens so quickly. And I drew back without him seeing me because I'm behind this tree, and I get my breath a little bit, and I step out, and the elk is facing me at 11 yards. He's facing straight on, and I took a straight on shot, and I never would have taken that shot. We were on the plane traveling, and we were talking about shot placement, and there was an article that we were reading about a front on shot, and it's not a high percentage shot, but it is there is a certain area where you can do some damage. And I basically stepped to the right side of the tree, and just within a second, I would say not even a second, I let it fly, and the arrow went all the way in to where the fletching was just sticking out. And he just made a huge turn and went through bushes and was gone. And we got it on film, and he, Charles and Johnny come running over to me, and I'm just stuck there, like completely in shock, like what in the world just happened. It was such an intense moment. And Roy just like got all over me for taking that front on shot. He just lit into me, and I was just kind of in shock. It was just a pretty amazing experience. And so they were trying to talk to me, and I was just, I couldn't say a word. It was just such a
Is this on camera?
Adrenaline. Yeah, it was just adrenaline rush.
Did you put that on YouTube or anything?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, you got to do that.
But anyway, we pretty much, he's like, let's go get it. I'm like, shouldn't we wait? Or we're not going to bust it in. And he's like, nope, he's done. And so we went through some bushes, and it's steep terrain, just walking down, and he was laying there 75 yards down the mountain, and just steam coming from him. And as I got to the elk, another hunting group was coming up. They came around a tree, and there they were, and they're like, who did that? It's like they were. If we didn't make those calls when we did, and it was probably drew in the hunters, but they were like 15 minutes behind us, Wow. So it was really close. But it took 2 trips to pull them back to camp. So basically, we gutted them out, hung meat in the trees there, and I took his head and probably about 75 pounds, and Charles and the other guys packed meat. We then hiked back to camp 8 miles, and then slept, turned around, hiked 8 miles, got the rest of the meat, and then came back.
Like the next day?
The next day.
That's
yeah. We were worried a little bit about bears and just somebody getting the meat. So it was just amazing. And we all had this, okay, first day, I probably shot them around 10:30, 10:45 in the morning. And the first day, here we are, this elk 5x5. It wasn't like it's not an elk that you would see on, some Western lodge or something like that. But, for a Florida boy, it was huge. And he's hanging in my office right now. And I named him Roy.
Did you like a shoulder mount?
I did a shoulder mount, and I got his cape as well.
Yeah.
So it took a year to get it. It was a lot more expensive. I processed the meat there, and because we flew out there, Southwest was the only airline that would allow you to take the meat onto the plane. So I basically took all their luggage and did put it on a crate and shipped it back to Jacksonville, and then bought coolers for everybody and packed it with meat, and we took all the meat on the plane. So it was still pretty expensive. But it was just a really special time. We saw one other elk the rest of the week. It was difficult hunting, and I believe, the 10% success rate is there, but it was.
Yeah, so your buddy still hunted hard, right? Because they are.
Oh yeah,
tag.
definitely. I was out. I tagged out, and I had a mule tag too, and so I did a little
cook,
bit.
Yeah,
yeah. Actually, we had a friend's dad that was there cooking. It was awesome, and we had it made. But it was a do-it-yourself trip, and I look at the prices of some of these trips, and people feeling like they can't afford doing it. But in the end, if I didn't shoot, now obviously shooting the elk raised the price of the trip, but if I didn't shoot an elk, it'd have been around $1,500, which was I thought a pretty good deal for.
That's about what it cost me to go out there, and we hunt out of a tent. Yeah, so not that bad. I mean,
but it's just an awesome experience. I mean, it's a completely different experience than whitetail. It really kind of opened my eyes to another level of hunting, and just a beautiful country.
Okay, if you can only hunt one species, whitetail or elk, what's it going to be?
That's a tough one. I probably would go with whitetail.
Okay.
And I'm thinking more like Midwest type whitetail.
Yeah, in like Kansas or Missouri, not Florida.
Not Florida whitetail. But I would probably go with whitetail. I think from a longevity of more time hunting.
Yeah.
It's rough.
You can burn out pretty quick elk hunting, especially if it's a hard hunt. The conditions are bad. You're not hearing any elk bugling. I mean, things can. Your mental attitude can go down.
It's a different experience, and I can completely understand the guys that just love to elk hunt and that's all they do. If I lived out there and I think I was more accustomed to the altitude and everything, I probably would say elk. But
are you planning on going back out? Do you have set plans to do that, or?
Right now, I don't. No, I'm really focused on trying to get a larger buck from, say, South Ohio, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Next year, I think I probably will be hunting Kansas. So we'll see.
Well, sounds like you're stacking the odds a little bit doing that. Probably not going to get that larger buck on your piece in Florida, but
no.
You never know.
And you're hunting Kentucky this year, right?
That's the plan.
Public or private?
It'd be public.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Western Kentucky, Central Kentucky. I'm not going to ask the WMA.
I actually don't know the specific area yet, but I have some friends that go there every year, and so I'm going to be tagging along with them.
I've been doing a lot of research myself as like a backup plan this particular year to hunt Kentucky, so that's why I was curious.
Yeah.
So, Duane, are there any other studies that you're excited about maybe finding some new information on, or something that's particularly interesting to you?
Well, with this current project that we're doing, I mean, there's just a wealth of data to be mined out of it. As I mentioned, this is the main objective is not these locations and following deer, but we have at this point probably over 500,000 locations, and so I have an undergraduate student working with me, and some of my graduate students are kind of taking these data and start exploring, other questions. How do they respond to weather, not just during this intensive hunting period, but, a lot of hunters are interested in how weather or, wind or rain, moon, all the things that could potentially affect, or influence deer movements in the archery season when, we have 300,000 hunters in Pennsylvania archery hunting, but even so, you don't see that response like you do during the rifle season. So I would think more environmental factors could be more important in explaining deer movement and behavior in that time of year.
Do you think some of that has to do with, I've kind of wondered about this in the past, do you think some of that has to do with the sound of rifle hunting, or do you think it's the fact that rifle hunters are not as aware as bow hunters in general, or there's just more of them? What's the biggest effect of archery versus rifle hunting, the pressure being lower?
Well, there's fewer hunters. They have 6 weeks instead of 12 days.
Yeah.
And so everything is just spread out. And so, we just haven't seen any evidence that there's even on opening day of archery season, there's nothing unusual about the deer movements.
Right, and maybe the opening day of rifle season, it's like they're just
No, it's the
totally
day before.
because of the scouting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that goes to support. It's not so much the sound of it, it's just
the hunter activity. I mean,
yeah,
the cars and the people and, going in to set up tree stands and that sort of thing.
yeah. It's really interesting. I was just thinking about with the success rate that you're talking about of, I think you said it was like 20% or 15% in that area. It's probably like the same, like 9% of those are the same dudes every year that have like something figured out. And then there's the other 1% that are, lucky or whatever. But, the 80-20 rule, 80% of the bucks are killed by 20% of the guys.
Yeah, that's an interesting question that we've always wondered. Unfortunately, we really don't have the data to answer that because when the Game Commission estimates harvests every year, we account for the fact that not all hunters report their harvest. But because of that, we have no way to track a single hunter through time.
Right.
With the point of sale system now, theoretically you could do that, but the system isn't perfect. So, yeah, but that's a really interesting question, actually a really important question to understand, who, it's not just how many deer are being killed, but more importantly, as we move forward, we know the number of hunters are declining, and we know that most hunters really only want to harvest 1 deer a year, or 1.5 deer, right? 1 or 2 deer, and they're happy. So that means that as hunter numbers decline, hunting as a tool to manage deer populations may not be as effective. And so we need to understand better how hunters hunt.
Yeah. So it actually could be in the state's best interest for the hunters to be more successful so they can manage populations better. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in deer in Pennsylvania, we figure that if you want to reduce a deer population, you need to be harvesting over 20% of the antlerless deer. And we're not, in these areas we have slightly lower reproductive rates, but we're certainly not reducing the deer population.
What is Pennsylvania's antlerless deer policy? How does that work there?
Well, there are the states divided up into management units, and they allocate licenses per unit, and they're issued on a first-come, first-served basis. That's the standard allocation. In addition to that, there's a DMAT program, Deer Management Assistance Program, that if you're an individual landowner, you can request additional permits. And so that's the antlerless harvest in PA.
Yeah. Okay. Adam, you got any other questions for these guys?
No, I think that wraps it up on my side.
Yeah. What about you, John? You got anything you want to talk about?
Not really.
Cool.
I think we're good.
I'm sure we'll pretty much be talking deer hunting the rest of the day and night.
Yeah, we got some more deer
So-
hunting to talk. Yeah, we got a cool banquet tonight and stuff.
Yeah.
How about Duane? You got any questions for us or anything else you want to cover?
No, just thanks for the opportunity. This is probably the first podcast I've done, so it's
right.
interesting to
Thank
Yeah.
you both
to
for
learn.
joining.
Yeah,
Keep
thanks
doing
for
some
having
cool
us. Appreciate
studies,
it.
and we'll keep having you back.
Hey, and before we jump off here, how can people follow both you guys?
Yeah.
How can they get? I know you have a blog.
Sure.
First of all, in Penn State. Can you tell us how to get there? Tell the
Yeah,
viewers.
so if you Googled Deer-Forest Study, you'll probably find us. But it's if you go, that's the easiest way to find us.
And you have a Twitter handle too, right?
Yep, it's WTD, Whitetail Deer Research.
Okay. And if they wanted to see the study that was produced today through the seminar, you had a really neat movie of the deer movement of the doe and the buck. Is that available online anywhere?
Actually, Most of what I presented today is on our blog. You'd have to hunt around for it.
Okay.
Because we've been writing for 1, 2, 3 years now. There's like over 300 posts on there.
I'll do everyone a favor, and I'm going to try to find it, and I want to put that out there, a link on our website, because that was fascinating. I mean, John, you were there. It was really fascinating.
It was great. And I actually have been following that for some time, and this is the first time I've met Duane. We've talked before on the phone, but it is a fascinating study. He does have the movies out there to where you can basically see, the GPS collared deer moving, and it gives the time and where it's going, and it's really fascinating to look at. And while Florida doesn't have the top topography that you have, it just is really cool to see, how a deer moves from one location to the next. So.
Yeah, I have not seen anything on this particular study, but I've been following that blog as well. And there's a lot of GPS study information on there that's really interesting, even to a guy from Florida who totally different area, but just understanding. And they break a lot of myths as far as, what deer do at certain times or how they react to certain things with GPS data. So definitely worth following. What did you say? You said Google?
Deer Forest Study.
Deer Forest Study. Yeah, that's
and Penn State, and it'll probably pop up.
And we'll link it on the website.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. All right. So tell us about. We kind of touched into what DeerLab does, but how does somebody get into your services?
Yeah, it's DeerLab.com, and we have a free trial that you can try out. You just sign up, and basically you go into the trial, and you can, add your camera locations and then upload photos, and we kind of walk you through that process. It's super simple. But DeerLab.com. We're on Facebook, DeerLab, Twitter, DeerLab, you name it. Just type in DeerLab and you'll find us.
Maybe give us a rundown of like some of what the plans are.
So we base it off of camera location. We have monthly and annual plans. The lowest plan on a month-to-month basis is $9 a month, and that's up to 10 camera locations. And then it jumps up from I can't remember the amount for each month, but like on an annual plan, it starts as low as $84, which is $7 a month, and it goes all the way up to $408, which is unlimited cameras, unlimited locations or properties. And a property really is not defined by property lines. It's more of an area where you hunt. And so it can be as large or as small as you want. A lot of guys will, a hunt camp or something like that will share an account so everybody can access the trail camera photos. Some people are a little bit more private and don't want to do that. So we have tools where you can kind of give access to people of just seeing maybe photos without seeing the data behind it, as well as the camera locations in your property. But there's a lot of different things that you can do with it. But as far as pricing, it can be as low as $7 a month, and then we have different plans. We have a fawn, doe, buck, and outfitter plan. So we try to get a price point depending on the amount of cameras that you're running to fit as many people as possible.
How do you drop your location for your camera in?
Yeah, we have a satellite map, so you can basically put in your address or zip code or whatever town, and then you kind of zoom into your area where you hunt.
Okay.
And then you can drop pins where your cameras are located. And so when you do that, we get the GPS location. So your camera doesn't have to have GPS coordinates or anything like that. The only thing that we use from your trail camera is the timestamp.
Okay.
And so a lot of times some of the cameras, they might have temperature and stuff like that, but their sensors are not necessarily the best. And so we're bringing in the weather data that is more accurate, and we're bringing in a little bit more information. So you could have, a camera that just has a timestamp, and we'll give you everything.
You got pressure and all that stuff, right?
Yep.
So your camera doesn't have to have those features.
Yeah, so it has barometric, wind speed, wind direction, moon phase, and we calculate all that. We do the calculations on our side. Because we're dealing with time zones, and we also have customers around the world using it. So it's all, we hook into, I want to say it's over 30,000 weather stations in the U.S., but we work worldwide.
So if you share a property with 3 other guys and you got like 10 cameras combined for like $20 a year, you could really have
No
like
brainer.
the full suite of data as far
it
as
really.
finding.
I mean, we're trying to educate hunters that there's so much more behind a trail camera photo. Most hunters will look at a picture, say that's a nice buck, and where was this buck when he was captured on the camera. So what we're trying to do is try to give you a better idea of aggregating that data from each photo of that particular buck and giving you where he is on the property. We give you like a heat map that kind of visually shows you where he is on your property. So it really kind of opens up kind of the thought process of, okay, if he's here, then here's potential bedding areas. You can start getting into a little bit more detail, but we try to keep it as simple as possible so the average person that is not very technical can get in there. And I mean, really, it's just dragging and dropping your photos from your computer into DeerLab for that particular camera.
Cool.
That is.
All right. Well, I think we're over an hour now, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up. But appreciate you listening. Appreciate everybody that's subscribing out there. We did get our 20 reviews. We'll probably cover that in another podcast, but really appreciate those guys putting the reviews on iTunes for us. So please keep those coming. Subscribe, keep it coming. What else you got, Evan?
Thanks, Duane. John, we really appreciate
Thank
both of
you.
you coming on and
Yeah, this was fun.
discussing this. This was a lot of fun. This is probably one of my favorites. I wish we could do more of this face-to-face.
Yeah, we
This
just
is
need to have
great.
like a national get our wives to let us leave for a national conference every weekend.
There's no way my wife will listen to this past an hour, so she's
Yeah.
you're not going to sell her on it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.